Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Christ consciousness. Well, I'm going to close up my investigations on the Son of Sam, David Berkowitz here. I've pretty much closed my investigations into a lot of these different areas. Now, I got involved in this research here because of the satanic cults supposedly involved in this. Because this was the real sexy story that was contrived and put out by mostly Murray Terry and a lot of people that he spoke with. So while he was a complete manipulator and moneymaker, it was more than that because he got a lot of information from a lot of other bad people. And we're going to cover this briefly here. I'm not going to go through it. I've talked about this a lot, and there seems to be the people involved in all informational cases, like this, JFK, etc. These are things that get mired down into disinformation, lies, and misinterpretations. And, I looked into the satanic cult aspect of this and wanted to further understand what was going on there and so forth. Of course, this was a time when there was a strange amount of satanic happenings in probably all over the United States. But apparently, because of Uttermire Park and other places, there were these animal sacrifices going on, quite a bit of them. They found a lot of dogs, but that had their heads cut off and so forth. And this Uttermire Park apparently was a haven for pedophilia, freaks, and weirdos and everything to go with that. And there was another park there that had similar problems. This does not seem to be connected to the Son of Sam case directly. This has to do with Satanists, and it appears that he'd like to blame them, Berkowitz, but he wasn't part of it. There almost seems to be another issue here of this particular group and what they were up to. Certainly, there's a lot of very bad stuff going on there, which basically was allowed to happen, apparently. So we have to understand what was going on there and what happens with him. Now, again, I want everybody to go to the link down below and listen to Dr. Todd Grandy give you in 20 minutes the entire Berkowitz story, what he was about, how his life, his childhood, etc. Now, Berkowitz had a really bad childhood. He had 3 serious head injuries, which in itself is something that really distorts people. Ramirez, the Hillside Strangler, he had serious head injuries. Howard Hughes didn't act weird. Those people who know Howard Hughes from the movies, again, he was big in the 70s and 80s with movies and talk about him. The guy who had his apartment and had real long hair and nails and everything else. Well, this is because he had a serious head injury. Peter Hurkos, the famous psychic, had a head injury. So when you get serious head injuries, you are damaged for life. Busey, the actor who was on a motorcycle, almost died from it. Now has a strange personality because of the fact that he had a serious head injury. So we can't underestimate this stuff. He was involved in all sorts of negative practices. And one thing that is quite interesting is that before he got involved in actually the shootings in Son of Sam, that he attacked 2 women with a knife, and he was never prosecuted for this. But here we go again. That kind of jumps out of the cliche of this guy in the night. And there is very little to no proof that there are extra people involved in this. Now, again, this is part of Terry's fantasy reality to scare the people of New York City so he could sell lots of books and get on TV. Now, there may have been helpers or other things, but there really is no connection here. The fact is that there was a group of strange people at this particular time getting together, and the lies about the Process Church and other things, which I don't even think was the Process Church in the 70s. They had evolved into something else. There's a mishmash of other things, and I also recommend people going to my other lecture on this, which is The Mystery Solved, about the Process Church, about Charles Manson. You've been fed a lot of wrong information, and deliberately. Now, Terry made up all sorts of stories and changed things. This has pretty much been verified. He never came up with anything good. He claimed to have to name names in another book. He didn't name any names. There weren't any other books because there was nothing to name. It was a big, giant fraud. He drew a lot of people in with him who messed them up and put them in other areas that is going on there. So people who slavishly worked for him, and then people who took him as a credible source. And this is the danger of all information. So I got into looking at this, but I look at cases like this to see, well, where do you get information from? How do you get any truth? What are the people involved in these things? And everybody you run into seem to be very disturbed people who are not interested in finding the facts of the matter. They just want to prove that they are right. So that's what they do. They go out there and they find and shape information, and this is what happens. So the whole conspiracy thing here, that there were multiple shooters and all this thing was going on, well, this seems to be complete fantasy. Now, whether there's a bigger story here to some degree, well, maybe there is. But there certainly was a lot of satanic happenings at this particular time in New York City. There seemed to have been satanic cults in Yonkers going back to the 20s. So there's all sorts of strange things going on in this particular area, and I'm not really sure why. And the people that live there, and I don't know why they're so interested in a case that's 40 years old instead of, worrying about whether they have proper security, taking care of the numerous criminals that run that state and the rest of the country. All of this going by in this delusional investigation here by a bunch of people that keep following one bad lead after another because basically they're just very bad people. They're not seeking truth. They think they're special. They want to condemn people that had nothing to do with it. I mean, it's really ridiculous. So it's very hard to trace any of them. The fact that he was connected with this satanic group and MK Ultra and etc. All this is nonsense. And the Process Church were not Satanists. Plain and simple. They were basically Scientologists who warped into different stages of pseudo-religious belief systems, basically Christian-based. And then finally, where they were making most of their money from donations and everything else, was telling people they were an animal sanctuary. And they've been doing this for many, many years before they actually started an actual animal sanctuary, which they've been running for 30 years now, with not a peep of anything negative going on there. But again, Maury Terry labeled them, and you can find him even on interviews, as being the people behind everything and so forth. So I don't believe any of this. There's not a single area that traces back to the Process Church, at least none of the higher people. Maybe there were some lower level people that claimed to be members and were doing, who knows what they were doing. I've heard so many misstatements from everybody. And this means from top to bottom. Certainly the professional investigators didn't get it right either. None of them have gotten it right. And now we get these people that have absolutely no qualifications whatsoever that are calling themselves researchers, investigators, and reporters. Well, you can't come from nowhere and do that and understand the bigger process. You're not going to understand how to do research and anything else. And they're really a bunch of freaks, weirdos, and jerks who've gotten together to try and basically fill their own pockets, or apparently they're very bored. So the whole idea is that it's just a waste of time listening to people like this who distort information. And of course they're following a book out there that has no legitimacy, and people are giving him legitimacy, which is really sad. Maury Terry was able to create legitimacy through being a movie producer and talking to people and writing the book that people basically were just tricked, plain and simple. And he seems intelligent. He wrote a good book. He's put this information together. And again, the people that believed him kind of fed into their world vision again. They were looking for the bad people, the Satanists, whatever position they were in. So this kind of gave them an actual understanding of how things worked in their mind, because they weren't seeking truth. They wanted to go the opposite. And so you've got people that ignore everything and say this is just a plain shit, and then the conspiracies kick in and it's everybody. So certainly it isn't that. Who do you have? You've got a whole cast of really people in this entire investigation, which I think is, these are common people in the world, whether they're professional investigators or others. They all don't get it. Now, is this only with the Son of Sam case? Well, you can better believe it's not. It's with everything it's investigated. It's all the information you have on everything from politics to religion to science, spirituality. Everything is a lie and an illusion. People are stating what they want to believe, what they want to believe in and want to make real in their life, or they want to create a fantasy for their own personal fulfillment. Nobody is looking at the facts. Nobody's seeking the facts, and I was able to find things basically within actually a few months, and then took a few extra months to try and verify. But the bottom line is that you're getting people that have no idea what they're talking about. They interview somebody, they hear somebody make a statement, and if it fits into their reality of what they want to believe, they take it as fact. It just isn't true. The bottom line is this guy was a very typical serial type killer, had all the trappings of this type of person, and had a horrible, horrible childhood filled with death, sexual problems, and mental illness. As simple as that. Real traumatic things happened to him, including, as I will state again, head injuries. 3 major head injuries that occurred. So, this fits in, and it's nothing more than that. His stories that he's been telling from day one, trying to tie things into the popular thing that was happening back there, into Satanism, and into different groups. And of course, the usual blame people came up, particularly the Process Church, which wasn't even named that, I don't think, at the time of the actual shootings. They had changed into other groups. They were teaching their own unique ways and making a lot of money. Now, they were around these cities where activities were happening. They were also around a whole bunch of other places. So the whole idea is to think just because someone's in that city and it's kind of weird, well, they became the fall guy. They became set up when there's absolutely no proof they did anything, but maybe it's been alleged that at that particular time they may have been involved in some usual type crimes that everybody did that at that time to make lots of money, and that was selling drugs and maybe pornography of a common type, because pornography was not available back then. So you're not talking about, quote, child pornography. You're talking about pornography that may have been sold then, and of course drugs. Everybody was selling drugs. They were everywhere. Everybody was buying them and using them, and you made a fortune that way. And the Process Church always seemed to have a bunch of money. It's hard to believe that they were able to do this through their begging, through their courses and other things, but certainly they learned from the best. Scientology, who taught them how to get money out of people for courses and how to tie them in and how they get people to pay. So I don't know what the full story there is, but it's unimportant. Are you going to, let's say you're a teenager and you stole a car and you did some vandalism. You're going to have that drag through your entire life, even when you go on to become, let's say, a doctor or a healer or whatever it is you become. You're still going to go back and say, yeah, but you stole a car. And that's exactly what's happening here. The Process Church has been around for 30 years now as a non-profit animal sanctuary group to stop the killing of animals all across the United States. And they've saved tens of thousands of animals, and they continue to do important work today. And this has been going on for 30 years, and not a peep has come out that they are involved in anything else. Now, the point is, if you go online and look them up, it's 98% positive information. And there are people that don't like the way they're treated by that organization because they are overworked and paid little. Well, what's new? Isn't that every organization? And what's interesting is that animal sanctuary groups tend to have a bad record of treating people and paying people, which is interesting in general. But the point is, if they did anything illegal in their teens as kiddies, well, they're doing an awful lot of good work for 30 years, and I think we need to pass by that. Apparently, there isn't any slap-in-your-face evidence against them because nobody has ever, none of their top officials have ever been arrested or anything going on there, period. There was some link some people talk about in those particular times and in the 70s, so forth, that alleged that Brother Eli was involved in some narcotic. Well, certainly could have been. As he said, they have a little bit too much money there. But that's alleged. We don't know. But, everybody back then was selling drugs. And then, of course, to make the story even sexier, after bringing in the Process Church, who Maury Terry blamed everything on, they then tried to connect Charles Manson, really a nobody that did nothing. Actually, he was a relatively successful guy in Hollywood. He was involved with hippie groups, and there was a lot back then. They all were into drugs. He was selling drugs. He was doing a lot of criminal activity to make money. He was a con man, a pimp. And, of course, he was smuggling drugs and everything else from what we understand there, and had some ties with organized crime as well. So this was what he was doing. Everybody was doing. There's huge amounts of money to be made there. But he did try to get into Hollywood. His songs were recorded by one of the Beach Boys. He worked at Universal Studios. I mean, this isn't the demon that you've been told about. And there isn't any proof that he was manipulated by some sort of military group either, MK Ultra, etc. Manipulated to do what? To be a pimp? This guy didn't do anything. He murdered nobody. It was Tex Watson who murdered that, along with the two girls that were there that murdered these people. He did not have anything to do with that. So the whole idea is that his whole criminal record has very little violence connected to it. So a lot of bad information came out of course, Vincent Bugliosi, the Los Angeles prosecutor in the Tate LaBianca murders, who was fed a bunch of bad information. I've went over that already as well. Look into that. This then got to Maury Terry, it got to other authors, and this was then reprinted. Hearsay. They hear it, and then they say it. And again, you're giving credibility to people, and you would think that if you get credibility from some sort of prosecutor, district attorney, that this is good information. Well, it's reported that this isn't good information, and you can't really trust anybody. So it's all been warped and everything else into this real comic book reality that Maury Terry ate up. He ate it up. He published it, so he had his entire career was made on this one book, which did turn into a bestseller. Assume he made some fairly decent money off of that, but how much we don't know. You don't make that much money as an author for your first book. He was involved in television producing, and he kept beating this dead horse, doing all sorts of bizarre investigations. He had a lot of people work for him as virtual research slaves. He never told them much. He kept everything to himself and drew in a lot of people who helped him for free. So all of this is part of the problem that we run into, adding up to a big bunch of nothing. The bottom line is this is a very typical serial killer. He was a very smart, weaselly guy, like a lot of these people are. Most of them tend to be kind of charismatic people. If you look at these serial killers, particularly Ted Bundy, who got a bunch of women in his car, is a fairly good-looking guy and had some charisma. All these people have kind of charisma, and they catch you in with it. And, of course, this is what David Berkowitz today. People are now thinking that he's a great guy. I don't want to get out of prison. I'm happy to be here with Jesus. And, well, he knows damn well he's not getting out of prison. I mean, he has to go up for parole every 2 years. They really think they're going to let this guy out that killed 6 people on a parole? Come on. That's never going to happen. What he's doing now is another con game, as he's doing with all this stuff. And the con game in prison is generally you take his attitude, you become a minister, preach the Bible, and you are then looked at okay in prison. That's how it goes. So to think that anything that he states as a psychotic murderer has any value is a little bit ridiculous. What does he know about anything? Nothing. He knows absolutely nothing other than his own personal story he wants to give you. So all these connections are wrong. A lot of it seemed to have come from bad sources, seem to be filtering through Vincent Bugliosi, who was given information by the Scientology, the people who the Process Church stole everything from and came on their hit list. So the Scientology, who's well known to have great influence in Los Angeles, gave them a bunch of bogus information. God knows what they were told. This also tied in with Charles Manson, who they made an scapegoat. He wasn't there. He didn't kill anybody. It was Tex Manson who did all the killings with the other 2 girls and also tortured the LaBiancas, who apparently had nothing to do with the case, but spent time torturing them just for the fun of it. So we have a lot of problems here of what's going on with this. So this information came through. Manson apparently was offered only 18 months if he would roll over on Tex Watson, and he refused to do it because he wasn't a rat. So it just shows you the kind of person Manson was. In his own particular way, he was kind of a good guy. He got two of the girls off of drugs. He was a songwriter, tried to get into Hollywood. I mean, people liked him. Manson was not this I'm going to murder you type running around the street stabbing and murdering people. He never murdered anybody. This whole image of him and the 35 books you can find on him on Amazon now is a big con. He's an industry. People write about him when he really didn't do anything. He was a pimp, a con artist, and he had this kind of group that he was with along with many others. The information written about him, told about him, is mostly wrong, just like everything else. And of course, you got to remember that this wrong information doesn't stop with Son of Sam, Charles Manson, or anything else. Everything you get is wrong. So remember that, do your research, and figure it out for yourself. Don't believe anybody. As I said, you want the whole story of Berkowitz? Well, Dr. Todd Grandy, 20 minutes, you know everything about him. Simple as that. There really nothing else has to be stated here. All this other conspiracy stuff doesn't add up. We have all sorts of information and we even have Manson's story, who was told to Shrek, his kind of biographer that was sympathetic with Manson, the ex-Church of Satan guy. Talked with Manson, wrote his official autobiography, and you get all the information about him there as well. And there's a few decent books on him. The rest of it is not. Everybody with Berkowitz doesn't know anything about his history, his childhood, or anything else. Nobody. This is really a comedy, if you can call it that, a comedy of errors that was committed by a whole bunch of people. And then we mix in all these amateur idiots and apparently a bunch of idiots on Facebook who have nothing better to do than spend their life investigating a 40-year-old murder case that's nothing more than a serial killer. There's nothing more there. They are not investigating modern Satanism. They're not investigating the control of dangerous street gangs that are Satanists and people involved in evil magic. None of this is being investigated. They don't even know about it because they won't talk to anybody that knows anything. They don't want to bring in an expert like me. So, I've now been criticized by pretty much everybody, including some retired police who think that I'm talking out of school. The point is you should be coming to me for help. You should be asking me about all these satanic crimes that I am an expert in and have been studying for 40 years. Not going to people that know nothing about it and basically all of the official documents, records, and everything else has conveniently disappeared. When people tend to look into these cases that get deep into the different agencies, they get harassed and told to knock it off. So the whole idea is, they're pushed away, they're retired, whatever else happens to them. So the point is this is all part of this case. So there is no good information, and the fact that people aren't seeking out experts that know what they're talking about and going to really some of the most goofiest, stupidest people on the planet, Facebook clubs. That's credibility. And by a bunch of boring people that don't have really a life. And then you have the prominent investigators in these cases that are just self-appointed nobodies that have, I believe, are being pushed ahead deliberately. We can't really trust what they come out with, but they certainly have zero information behind them. And this is so typical. And, they push these nobodies out there who basically can be disgraced at any time if they want to, and that's part of the game, to report things they have no background in it, no analytical abilities, know nothing about research. I've been researching for 50 years. That's why I find everything quickly and easily. So you've got a whole group of these very unprofessional people, people that are all very strange and odd and hooked up to bizarre belief systems and everything else that you get with it. And they're talking to nobody of any value. And when somebody does of value comes up and they're fully aware they don't even bother to talk with you to find out, are you credible? Are you not? Well, isn't that really interesting? So you call yourself a researcher, but you won't talk to people who know what's going on, who've compiled information. I've never heard Dr. Todd Grandy mentioned other than by me. Now, this is a reliable source, as we can go from, quote, trained, educated people from within society. This is a person who is a noted mental health professional who apparently makes constant YouTube videos on all sorts of people to give you their kind of mental profile, which is interesting. Now, I don't find him to be overly enlightened. He doesn't believe in anything in the, quote, metaphysical area. But when it comes to regular stuff, he seems to know his stuff generally. Now, again, this gets back to, can you trust anybody? No. What percentage of his information is correct? And I talked about this as well. And somebody may be 100% correct with one person and maybe 100% not correct with another because they got wrong information. And this happens with any source or anybody you know. And I found this with everybody. So, yeah, you got the dirt on that. Then you find them again and say, well, only about 5% of what you told me is right. The rest of it you've gotten wrong information from. So you have to be able to discern that. So you go and you believe people because they've written a book, you've talked to them on the phone, and this is the kind of problem you run into. So as far as I'm concerned, this case is closed. We know exactly what happens. I have given everybody, the mystery of what is the Process Church, Charles Manson, and other things. Well, I've revealed all those stories in detail, so do look those up and listen to that to get the real story there. The rest of what you're getting is all done by ignorant sensationalists that know absolutely nothing. And to think that anybody's going to be interested in a 30, 40-year-old case and that you're going to turn something up and you're going to go to the courts or the DA and they're going to follow through on this, you've got to be kidding. Let's hope they wouldn't follow through on this. There's too many things that are going on right now that are much more important than this very old case. They have a guy in prison. He's admitted to doing most of it. There's nothing further to gain here, and we don't need to spend more and more time and money when we have huge, serious problems out there. Where are the people investigating this huge pedophilia ring done by officials? Where is the arrest of the Russian mafia? Where is the arrest of the Latin kings and other criminal satanic gangs out there? Where is that? There's nothing out there going on. So to worry about something like this really gets to the point that it's the lowest level functioning. And it's not just these ignorant, regular, common people. Everybody involved in this case, no matter who it is, doesn't have any credibility whatsoever. And who cares? This case should be dropped and dropped fast. There's nothing to learn here. These bored people should be putting their energy into researching and helping crime victims of today, finding out what's going on, working on corruption. There are missing children out there by the thousands that are being tortured, raped, and murdered every day, and nobody cares. They want to look at this. Well, I know what kind of people you are. You're cowards. You're doing nothing. You're going after what is a goofball, gumball story that has no value to anybody. And you don't want to get involved in anything serious because that means you'd have to deal with real life. And that's exactly the problem we have here now. So this is a nothing case. Of course, it's fascinating to some degree, especially since we've had this comic book written by Maury Terry called the Ultimate Evil Book, which can't be trusted at all. His conclusions are completely and totally bogus and wrong. Nothing has ever been proven. He's got the whole second half of the book with his fantasy made-up situation. But of course, a lot of that he got from apparently Bugliosi and others who came out and blamed from information that he got, the Process Church, Charles Manson, etc. So, Maury Terry, to some extent, was just repeating what was given to him by others. The whole other thing is that he warped and twisted information that he got from Berkowitz and other papers, so his story would be more interesting. And that's exactly what he did. So, the point is, that's what everybody does out there. People, pay attention to that. Don't believe it. You may find, people are fascinated, particularly apparently women that are middle to later age seem to be fascinated by true crime. They seem to be fascinated by serial killers. This is some little perverse thing with women in particular that seem to find these things interesting. As a little hobby, I guess there's nothing wrong with it, but, these things get carried away by a whole group of people that just know nothing. Everything they report is wrong. They are stuck into blaming the evil Satanists, thinking that there's this giant group of Satanists that are doing everything evil out there. And certainly most criminals out there, particularly in this now, not in the past, but certainly there seems to be some in the past as well, are involved in this Satanism, which is so popular now. But they're not covering that. They're not getting involved in what modern Satanists are doing. They have no idea of what the history of Satanism is in general. And if you're going to go down and track down non-Satanists and call them Satanists like they've done with the Process Church, well, you're losing the point here. You're getting pushed into an area where they want you. You're in a bogus, stupid, ridiculous area that's going to produce nothing. These were not Satanists. Whether they were involved in some sort of criminality 30, 50, 40 years ago is a little bit ridiculous. Who cares? This organization, which now has morphed into a very nice charity helping people, is plain and simple what it is today. And you're not going to find any of the real problematic people there. So there does tend to be connections between people, but criminals do know each other to a large degree. That's who they hang out with. Criminals, again, would be in what? You think they're collecting baseball cards and chewing bubblegum? Well, they're going to be involved in these debased practices, otherwise known as reverse Christianity, known as Satanism, because that's what it is. Because Satanism is part of Christianity. It's not part of the occult. It's not part of anything that's part of Christianity. And the Process Church has been deliberately labeled who were basically Christians, who were seeing this as a Gnostic point of view of, we're all kind of satanic, aren't we? Well, that's right. It's the same ideas that we have good and evil in us, and you have to recognize that. Instead of ignoring Satan and Lucifer, you have to say, well, that's part of your personality, something you should watch. You say, what is your personality? And if your personality is more in that way, well, that's something that you should develop out of that. So where do you see yourself? And this is the teaching of the Process Church kind of in a nutshell. And of course, they did some outrageous things to do what? Get attention. Why did they want attention? To make money. So the whole idea is none of this seems to add up and continues to go into this ridiculous thing, being led down paths away from what is really going on. But we really know now what's happening here. I've been telling everybody that Maury Terry's been a fraud, is not good information, what he stated about all these people, the Process Church, Charles Manson. Well, I've been stating this from the beginning. He appeared to do some okay research into the actual shootings, but we're not sure that any of that. He also made statements and came to conclusions there that are not good. So the whole idea is that he did piece together that, which basically was common knowledge within the newspapers around there and within easily obtainable police documents. But really there's nothing new there, and nobody knew anything. So there is the usual ifs, ands, and buts going on there. There were no witnesses. There was one survivor, but don't know what happened because the person was shot in the head. So it's not really has any value there. So there's nothing there, and certainly nobody has been able to come forward with any decent information except those who want to exploit this and make money off it, which was Terry. And Terry continued to do this to the day he died and continued to tell people he had information which he didn't, and all the stuff that goes with it. There is nothing there. He fooled law enforcement who bought what he stated hook, line, and sinker and moved them off the track. And they had problems because of the fact of the information that Maury Terry put out. So he deceived everybody and really hurt this case. Why? To fill his pockets. They should have called him Maury National Enquirer Terry, because that's the kind of credibility he has. And I'm not even sure National Enquirer. What was that, the World Weekly News, where they had bat people and all those kind of fake funny stories? Well, he is pretty much in the category of that kind of newspaper from the past. Nothing here has value. As with most things, people tell you things like we don't have free energy, we don't have cures. This is all nonsense. And people within that industry are the ones that are perpetrating most of this kind of knowledge. The whole idea is that this is a sad commentary on the way everything is presented to you and how you're given bad facts, you're given poor information. All of that is what's going on here. And people, I guess they just think it's fun and interesting. And they want to believe all this stuff, yet there's no evidence. And we have to get evidence. We have to find the culprits and not just point our fingers. Oh, we don't like them processed church people. So we're going to point our finger out. We're going to grab them. And this is what happens with everything. Well, while you're grabbing them, the real culprits are getting away with it, and we're not getting to the core of things. Let's get facts. And nobody has facts. Nobody has anything to do with the truth that's out there. Not seeking truth. I mean, this is really mental masturbation. This is at a level of perversity that is unbelievable, and you need to stay out of it. So hopefully that clears it up. I'm moving on to other things. I've been trying to do this for a while with several issues. I don't think if something comes up, not particularly in this case, because there's nothing to come up with Berkowitz. I mean, it's the same old story. If something shocking comes out, I'll try and let people know. But, I've investigated and find the truth about the Process Church. Again, there's nothing there. If somebody comes out with hearsay or they told somebody something, well, that's not evidence, people. That's somebody who was a plant sent to you to then talk about those people. You don't think that happens? Well, it does happen. We know the story of Charles Manson. So much has been written about him. It's either lies, fantasies that go into these books. We know what he did. We have his whole life story written by many people. There's nothing to learn there. If you find that fascinating, well, read the many books. But read many books and put the pictures together and find out. A puzzle together. We know what the Process Church is up, basically. And they've been around for 30 years as an animal sanctuary doing good work. I don't see why we need to go after these people unless there is some real information there. And there certainly doesn't seem to be. In 30 years, I have not been able to find a single allegation against them other than some poor management. Oh, duh. Oh, you mean they're an American business or a business in general? Because all businesses around the world are dirty. So the whole idea is that's it. There's nothing tracking there. We know every second of his life what Charles Manson was doing and who he was connected to. There is no mystery there. The only mystery that still remains out there that we don't have any clarification on is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino of the Temple of Set and formerly of the Church of Satan. We still don't know what this scumbucket was up to. We just don't know. And we can't, again, point fingers at him, accusing him of horrible crimes until we have some certain information. Now, the problem with Aquino is we do have several people who have pointed their finger at him saying he did it. So this creates a huge question in the reality of what's going on. People have named him. They have picked him out as a person. Now, the problem is most of these people stating that are people that are mind-controlled people who've been tortured, abused. One of them has a schizophrenic with 7 personalities. This muddles up the water. But there seems to be too many people pointing their fingers at this person, identifying them. But I also have to wonder there, it's too quick, simple, and easy. Why him, and why is he doing everything? It doesn't make sense to me that to be one prominent person. He's named because he was on TV. They can't name anybody else because they don't know who they are. So it's very convenient. So one person with the 7 personalities said he was a member of the Temple of Set, and that's who he knew who Aquino was. It wasn't from TV, but he was a member. Well, I don't know if that's the case or not. Can we prove any of this? Now, we can do a lot of evidence to prove, well, where was Michael Aquino when so many things were accused of him doing that? We should be able to track him somewhat. Was he in that city? Was there a military base close to what was happening there? Where was he assigned at that particular time? To think that he's trotting around all of the United States on some sort of military aircraft in itself is a big stretch. We just don't know. But the bottom line, he's the only person that we really don't know anything about. Now, people have infiltrated the Temple of Set. They've never found anything illegal going on. There's a lot of dirty stuff that is deep within that organization. Michael Aquino is a devout Nazi, loved those people, has the supposedly Himmler's dagger. This is a very disturbed person. But, it's very typical of the military. And the military is very Nazi-based. They worship the Nazis. They kiss their ass. That's what they do and have been for years. The U.S. military has always had this problem, particularly when they allowed so many of them in and worked so closely with people who are enemies. So the whole idea is that this is something that we don't know about. They do have an entire division in the Temple of Set that is dedicated to Nazi magic, the Trapezoid Order. So they do have a division that's dedicated to vampirism, run by his wife. They do have a division of Nazi magic, the Trapezoid Order, that was led by an Edred Flowers, otherwise known Thorson. So all of this stuff is a reality here. So something stinks there. Now, the bottom line is that what actually happened, well, we need to know. If this person was involved in this, we need to know. But you're not going to know, because it's also not just him. If he was doing that, it means there's a whole chain of command within the U.S. Army that knew what he was doing and allowed it to happen. So there's real problems here. It has come out with his major detractor, a Mr. Douglas Dietrich, who basically gave him a clean bill of health at the Presidio, stating that he was 100% innocent of any bad goings-on at the Presidio because he wasn't even there. He has put this on film and stated it, even though he is constantly going after Michael Aquino on so many things, but has stated that he is cleared from those charges. So if it wasn't that, if that's something he wasn't involved, he's been tied to so many other things. Well, what is the truth here? And this is how, when you do real research, what you find out. But I'll tell you right now, people aren't doing real research. It takes hours and hours of listening to and then re-listening to and reading. People aren't doing this. I'm a professional researcher and I've been doing it for basically 40 years right now. But I've been involved in alternative studies for over 50. But the point is that that's the reality of what's going on with all these things. So let's get to the truth. Let's get to the facts of everything. And let's stop being lazy ignoramuses and following people that have zero background. They have written no books. They haven't done anything. They got a little camera. And you have to wonder why someone's successful and pushed by YouTube that just goes out and get a camera and walk around the neighborhood where these shootings take place. Well, it's kind of interesting. The point is these people have no background whatsoever. They're not a studier. They're not a reader. They weren't involved with it. They read the Ultimate Evil book, and that was their extent of background. So they don't have anything. And, you have to be a very intellectual person and understand research to do what's right here. And the bottom line is none of these people have that qualification. I mean, they're really some of the lowest people you can think out there that are totally and completely disconnected from the truth. And they are basically, I guess, doing it for their own ego and nothing more. So it's really sad. And, of course, they're making a few bucks at it as well. So hopefully that's cleared things up. There's really nothing further to say. If I come up with further information on any of these characters, I will release it, but there isn't much left to research. And I've been doing this now for several months. I've really come to found most of the facts. If things pop up that have any credit or merit, I will let people know in these areas. But really, we have serious problems out there. We have a horrific amount of children that are disappearing, pedophilia, and everything else is going on through all sorts of organizations. And we really need to move our energies over to those things. This is real. People are being kidnapped, murdered, made into sex slaves every day, and nobody cares. Yet you're worrying about some goofball serial killer of pretty much no note and nothing really special about this guy at all. So we need to fully understand that. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully this closes the case for you as well. And let's move on to much more interesting things.